Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Nat Hab Book Club. Author Kristin Hannah on Alaska and the Great Alone, featuring #1 New York Times bestselling author Kristin Hannah, Nat Hab Bear Camp manager and expedition leader Caprice Stoner, and hosted by Brooke Mitchell. I'm Rob Mess. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Brooke, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, did we lose? Is Kristen still available? Um, while we're waiting for Kristen to get back online, hopefully she'll get us here soon. Caprice, hi. I'm so happy that you are here as well. Our wonderful bear camp manager, and you also have a phenomenal long history in Alaska. Yeah, so why don't we just
Awesome.
like go ahead and start with your awesome story? So
Sounds good.
you have a fantastic background and a long time that you have been in Alaska as well. So let's get into a little bit of that. How did you get to Alaska and bear camp? And maybe we'll just plant a little seed of how you got to meet Kristen's father, Lawrence. So you go ahead with your story.
Sounds good, Brooke. Thank you for having us today. It's a very interesting story, Bear Camp in itself, but and I feel very privileged to be here. Hopefully, Kristen will be back on the online here shortly, and I feel very privileged to be able to be her friend and talk to her some about her book. But starting with Bear Camp, I had been in another industry altogether, and when I turned 40 years old, I realized that it was time to make a change. So I answered an ad, applied for a job to be a bear camp manager in Alaska. And at this point, I had never been to Alaska before. I had a telephone interview by a gentleman. His name was Lawrence John, and he was the owner, one of the owners of Great Alaska Adventures. And we talked on the phone for about 45 minutes, and he decided to give me a chance. He thought that I had the opportunity and the know-how to be the bear camp manager of a remote bear viewing facility here. So he and I met up, and it has been a wonderful journey. He was pretty much my mentor, for lack of a better word, over the years. And this is my 20th summer as bear camp manager. Um, he was a great person. I have a very special place in my heart for all of Kristen's family, her brother Kent and wife Julie, of course, Lawrence's wife Debbie, and but in particular Lawrence. He just had the wonderful ability to make you want to be a better human being. Um, I've spoken to some of our friends uh, that have worked there in the past, and we all kind of have our Lawrence voice, and he just has that ability to make you feel like the sun is shining on your face whenever he's uh, whenever he's around, and he can also be very stern. So we developed this program together, and we're still developing the program. I believe Bear Camp started in the late 90s, and they established Bear Camp on what used to be a homestead, an original Alaska homestead. And year after year, we would try to improve the facility and our knowledge of the bears, and we were just living right there amongst them. So it was great. It was a great opportunity for me, and I will always be thankful for it. It changed my life, so it was wonderful.
Yeah, sounds like an absolutely phenomenal experience that you had, and also the big leap of faith to go all the way to Alaska, and for him to take a big leap of faith on you too.
That's exactly right. I did have some of the qualifications. I have my private pilot's license. So for years out there, I was the um, control tower or the weather tower at Bear Camp to go or no go, to be able to come out and land on the beach right there in front of camp. And we wanted to upgrade the safety protocol and different things at camp. But one of the big things that Lawrence and I worked on together as bear viewing, when I first started bear viewing and when I first started working at Bear Camp, Alaska Bear Camp, bear viewing was kind of in its infancy. So it was a lot of times we would only see 2 or 3 planes a week out in that area. But then, and most of those planes would be us landing right there on the beach in front of camp. And that's the only way that you can get out to this area is either by plane or by boat. So, hey, Kristen.
Yay!
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
My little island house here lost power the minute we went live. I'm so sorry.
Always happens. Always happens that way.
Oh, it's fine. The universe is just keeping us on our toes. That's all, you know. But yeah, Caprice was just doing a wonderful job of explaining her deep connection to Bear Camp and how she met your father, Lawrence. So, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Caprice. But
Of
yeah,
course.
so I guess that I'll just start from the very beginning then, because Caprice gave a little hint of today and how there is a deep connection between Nat Hab and your family. But could you elaborate a little bit further on that, Kristen? What is your family's history in Alaska? How did that land come to be that your father owned that then became the Adventure Lodge?
Well, I think Alaska was really sort of the culmination of a lifelong dream for my dad. I don't know if Caprice mentioned, but he was an adventurer. He was a big, larger than life kind of personality. And he always, I think, was looking for a place in the world that he could make his mark, a place that could be special, and that he could actually sort of, create this thing that was in his mind. And from my perspective, it started in about 1968, and I think we'll be maybe talking about this a little bit later, but I mean, we're going way back to go forward, but so in 1968, we lived in Southern California, and my dad and mom decided at some point that, California was getting too busy, that the traffic was terrible, that there were, too many people down there. And so he put us all in a Volkswagen bus, with the curtains and all of the craziness of 1968. And we went on this journey as a family, 5 kids and a dog, and my mom and dad, and we drove through states. And the idea was to raise our hand when we found home. And my dad's dream was wherever this was, wherever the next home would be, was where he was going to begin building this campground and I guess a campground that was in his mind. And we all, for whatever, individual reasons, we all ended up choosing the Pacific Northwest. And so he built his first campground in a little place called Port Angeles, which was at the base of the mountains in Washington State and near the ocean. And and I think that's when he really started thinking about what he wanted a place to be like. And I think as life went on and he got older and the Pacific Northwest became more and more populated around us, he began looking for the next place, the next wild place. He was always looking for wild places. And Alaska fit the bill on that. And he connected, I'm going to say, you might know this better, Caprice. I'm going to say in about 82, 81, something around there, early 80s, with the woman Kathy, who became his partner, and her family had homesteaded uh, in the Homer area. I forget what it was called, something Bay. I forget at the moment now, but had homesteaded up there. And she and her mom had this beautiful campground on the banks of the Kenai River. And they became partners and they started building what was originally called the Great Alaska Fish Camp. And I think that's when, both my dad and my mom really began this evolution um, into becoming, you know, Alaskans. Maybe they didn't live there year round, but this was really the place that had their heart. And I think I can't remember what year, but that led into meeting Wayne, who we can talk about later if you'd like to,
Oh yeah.
who was, from my perspective, was this hermit who lived in the middle of nowhere on what is now your bear. And he and my dad became friends, and they started originally, I think, with an outstation there. This bear camp experience, which I'll never forget. I mean, the first time I went there, you go in the small plane, you're looking down, they're saying there's bear camp, and you're like, but where's the airport? I don't see the airport. Where are we landing? And that's when you realize that you're going someplace that is entirely unlike anywhere you've been before. And so that is sort of how we as a family ended up, in Alaska and building this lodge, which is so much more than a lodge. Both of them, their experiences. They are stepping into a different kind of world and a different kind of life. And and since you guys still have Caprice, who has worked, for my dad and my brother for so many years, they find such special employees and people who really want to share their knowledge and their love of this place and these animals and conservation with those of us who are just lucky enough to come by for a short period of time.
Wow, that is such a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it makes me curious on wanting to know then, so then how much time did you spend in Alaska? Did you work at the lodges with your father, or did you like come in the summer times? And did that make a big imprint on you? Because obviously you wrote a lot about that, which we'll get to. But yeah, what is your roots and your connection personally to Alaska?
I have tried to remember. I can't remember. I may have been the first one in the family that went to Alaska. My brother and I. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that we were. So I went up. I think it was my sophomore year of college, so late '70s, to work at a fish cannery in a place called Igigik, which I could not find on a map right now if I tried. But it was one of those places where it's a bunch of college kids and you're working 24/7 when the fish are running. And and I remember coming home and telling my dad, like, this is amazing up here. I wasn't able to do a bunch of traveling afterwards. But I think either right around that year or the next year, he and my mom went up to Alaska. And so I was already gone by the time, they started the Alaskan adventure. I was, moving into my own adventure at college. So I never worked there. I'm the only, I think I'm the only one in the family who didn't ever work there. But I tried to go up every other summer, and I would go up for, 2 weeks, and I always made sure. I mean, bear camp was always the highlight. I just, which is why, I mean, I don't know if even people know it, but there is a segment in the Great Alone that is in bear camp. Before it actually exists, but it's the location. I think is the young man Matthew flies Lenny into it, and they see the bears because it's just such a remarkable spot.
Wow, how cool. Yes, I vividly remember that exact scene. I mean, your book was so vivid. I felt like I was there. I had actually just traveled to Alaska when I picked up your book for this book club, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. Being able to see that and then like see it in the book as you were describing it. And so now that we have a background, your background, we understand that this runs deep. Like this book also meant a lot to you, and everything. So let's actually go back into the inspiration. And so like your books are super intentional and provide a great glimpse into women's lives in certain time periods. So what was the inspiration for this book, The Great Alone?
This book is sort of an outlier for me in a lot of ways, and one of the ways that it's different is sort of the inspiration and how it began life and how it actually existed and came into the world. So the way it started with the Great Alone was the book before was The Nightingale. And The Nightingale was one of the books, perhaps the book, that most substantially changed my life as a writer. It was like the 20 something, book that I had written. But even as I was writing this book, The Nightingale, I knew it was special. I knew there was something about this book and something about this story that had the potential to really impact people and to really be embraced. I could never have imagined the way it was actually embraced, but I knew that there was something there. And so being, fairly obsessive about my writing and whatever my mental issues are, I started realizing that I needed to write a book that couldn't compete with The Nightingale. I wanted something that nobody could say, oh, it's just like The Nightingale, but The Nightingale was better, because I knew that it was a special story, and so I wanted something that just could stand on its own completely. And for whatever reason, I decided that what I wanted to what I wanted to write was a domestic thriller set in Alaska. And so I did. I began writing, and it was all this Alaska that I love, that I know, this sort of Homer, Soldovia, Kenai, all the places that I had been to. And what I love most about Alaska are the people. My dad's wife, Debbie, has a group of friends that just amaze me. I mean, they are tough, they're durable, they're fun, they're funny. They like drop their kids off at carpool and go moose hunting, and these are not the kind of women that I meet normally. And so I thought, oh, I really want to write about these, remarkable women. And the bottom line was that it turned out that as much as I read thrillers and love thrillers, which I do, um, I could not write one. And so I spent about a year and a half writing this book that I finally sent it to my editor, and I said, I just don't know what to do. Nothing seems to, doesn't seem to be a very good book. And my editor, bless her heart, said, yeah, you're right. It's not a very good book. It was like, okay, well, I was hoping you'd have a different response, but I said, so what is working? And she said, Alaska. And so I sort of cleared the board, threw everything away, and decided to write a book that was just a little more personal. Not that this is in any way my story or my family's story, but this story of a 13-year-old girl coming of age um, in a time and place that feels very uncertain and very frightening. And you can see from my book this year, the women that I've been interested in Vietnam vets for a long time, and the price that they can sometimes pay. And so I just kind of put a lot of these ideas together and really let my love for and kind of my fear of this this magnificent state um drive the plot of this book. and it became in its own way, I think, kind of a thriller because there is this danger, there's this very uncertain father and this mother who I think stands in for a lot of women who find themselves in dangerous situations that they cannot or do not get out of. But mostly it was about this 13-year-old girl whose best friends, were in books, learning to survive in this remarkable place. I can't remember
Yeah.
now what the question is.
No, that was great. You just hit on so
Oh,
many
okay.
things. That was phenomenal. I mean, yeah, when you were just like first talking about these incredible women that you got to meet, like I was just thinking of Large Marge,
No.
she was probably my favorite like character in the entire book was Large Marge. I was like what I would do to have like a Large Marge in my family, like my life. And yeah, the way you had us as readers connect with these personalities was just incredible. And actually, one of my questions was, um, were any of the characters inspired by real people? Was there like a direct correlation, or was it kind of like the idea of these people that you met, you then manifested in these characters?
I mean, in a lot of ways, I would say all of the characters are me somehow. If there's anybody that is the through line in my books, it's definitely me. And the one of the I won't say a downside, but one of the byproducts of having an adventurer father and living the kind of life that we did is you move around a lot and you go to a lot of schools. And, I went to 4 high schools, 3 junior highs. And so I was always the new kid. And of course, and I grew up, I was the age of Lenny. I was 13 in 1973. And it was such a time not unlike today, of tumultuousness in America, and there was a lot of anger and division, and as a 13-year-old, you already don't know where you belong in the world, and so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of sort of thematically my mother, and she was a very soft, beautiful, intelligent woman who had to learn to be tough, and who ended up, in Alaska, where I don't imagine she ever thought that she would end up, and living, out of trucks or in, however it was that their life unfolded. And so I think there's always pieces of mother and daughter in there. My mom passed away when I was in law school. And so I'm constantly searching for her. And she appears in a lot of my characters. But I'm very careful. No brother, no sister. My dad is not in any way. My dad may have kind of inspired Tom Walker.
Hmm.
A little bit. So I think there's, bits and pieces there, but it's mostly fiction.
That makes sense. I can also see like Tom Walker and like his have that big idea about having the adventure lodge and
Yeah.
turning the
How's
town
that came
into
about? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's perfect inspiration. That makes sense. And one of the things about your book and your writing in general is it is so well written and the details are so spectacular that it almost doesn't feel like fiction. Like there's multiple times I was like, is this real? Like, is this what's the line between nonfiction and fiction? So actually, could you peel back a couple layers and take us into your writing process? How do you do research for one of these meticulously detailed books from this like time period where we feel like we're there? Like, how did you bring us into 1974 Alaska life?
Well, I do it the way I do all of them. This one actually required less research than, say, The Women or The Nightingale, because I lived through the era, because I know the places, and I was careful to, choose settings, that I knew fairly well, because I was able to travel to these places, go spend days in Soldovia, and I've been going to, Homer forever. So that, definitely helps a lot. But then it comes down to a lot of memoirs, really. I read a lot of memoirs, and Alaska is one of those places where a lot of people have written about their experiences of living off the land or off the grid, or all of those sorts of things. And interestingly enough, because of when it was set, um we were talking pre-internet, pre-computer, all of that time period, the the memoirs of people written in the 20s were almost just as relevant to me as the memoirs written in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And Kathy, like I said, my dad's partner, Kathy's mother wrote a series of young adult novels that
Oh,
actually were really inspirational and helpful to me as well. And then ultimately, I had a couple of people. I had Deb's friend Anita and I had Kathy both read the manuscript early, and and tell me if anything was off or a mistake. One of the mistakes I remember, and this is a perfect example of the sort of difficulty of researching a historical novel, was I think I had Lenny, when they lived in their little house there, the little cabin, um, getting oysters out of the bay. Oysters or clams, one or the other. And the bottom line was, you can't, they're not there. And
oh,
and I would, I'm like, aren't they everywhere? But no, apparently not. There are these very specific places. And so those are the kind of mistakes that if you don't have somebody who really knows the area, you're going to make.
that's so helpful. And also having that resource, oh my gosh, having those books
Oh,
that she written from the time period. What?
yes. They were wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Especially for like a coming of age story. That's just so perfect. So you just said that you mentioned a little earlier that you have a certain affinity that you have just like grown with the Vietnam time. And I would like to focus a little bit on Ernst's story and his PTSD and just like how it was central to like the family struggles. So why did you feel it was important to show how untreated trauma affected not just the veteran, but the entire family?
Well, I mean, uh, like I said, so I was, 11, 12, 13 during the Vietnam War. Um, it made a huge impact on me. My best friend at the time, her father was shot down and never returned. And so I wore his POW bracelet, which had his name and the date he went missing, on a silver bracelet on my wrist for, probably 15 years. So the reminder of this man who had gone to war and not come home was always with me. And a lot of my friends' dads served and came home. And it was obvious even to kids that they were changed, right? And then we saw the way they were treated when they came home. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. And all of it just really stuck with me. And so I've written about it a lot of times. I think Homefront is another one where I have a female Black Hawk pilot, and she comes home with some PTSD. So I just really want, one of the things as a novelist is you have a platform and you have an ability to raise an issue and talk about it, and allow people to form their own opinions. And I think, and create empathy for people. And I think that, when we as a society ask people and their families um, to make sacrifices for us, we need to care for them. And so that sort of is all of that. Now, that all being said, it's also true, and I tried to show also that Ernst was arguably troubled before he went to Vietnam, because I don't want to make the kind of distinction that this kind of PTSD always causes this kind of response. But it was a really good way to allow me to write about this abusive man and yet hopefully engender some sympathy for him, some understanding, so that you had at least some idea of why Cora stayed. And I really wanted to look at through the novel why women do stay in these situations, because we tend to judge them harshly, and it can sometimes be a difficult emotional situation to get out of, as well as a dangerous one.
And I know that resonated a lot with me, and I'm sure with any women who read the book that have been through traumatic experiences. And I really appreciate that as well, because it is so easy. I'm sure all of us have that in our life, being women or have women in our lives. Like, why don't you just leave? Like, what do you mean just leave? And then I also loved in the book, you brought up a lot how there wasn't much empathy, sympathy, anything for women leaving their abusive husbands back at the time, you know? And so I found that very enlightening too, as like a time of like what year, what generation of this was from, and what these women
Right.
went through. Yeah, so that actually just hit on my next question there is like, why was it important to you to center around the women that evolved from this one man's trauma? But yeah, you
From
did.
the, I'm sorry, the, what would you say? What was your question?
Yeah, you like had two of my questions that you answered at once,
Yeah.
which is perfect. Because my next one was like, so why did you decide to focus on the women's story and how like their story evolved from one man's trauma, especially back in that time when women didn't have much of an option to get out of the situations.
Well, I mean, women is what I do. Women,
Hmm.
this is what I'm interested in. And it's interesting because I look back at my career, and so I was a lawyer, and when I got pregnant with my son, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So I became a stay-at-home mom. But I needed something to, I think, sort of fulfill me and keep me engaged. And that's, when I started writing, and I can talk about more about how I did that if you'd like later. Um, but I realized that, since my first book was published at 30, and now, it's 30 years later, 35 years later, my stories have always followed um, the problems, the issues, the constraints that we women face as we age and as we go through our life. And in the beginning, I was worried about falling in love and getting married. And then I was, interested in raising kids and working, and how you balance that and how you stay married. And as I've gotten older, I would say starting at about 50, I'm really interested in women's rights, women's histories, women's strength, um, reminding us to band together, to stand up for each other, and to do less judging of each other and more helping and accepting of each other. And so that's really what I'm constantly looking for, is how can I say something to women that I think is powerful, that they need to hear. And I think it's true, when a woman finds herself in a difficult situation, and it could be anything, we tend to stay and diminish ourselves to help other people. And I think sometimes it's important to be reminded that we as women have every right and responsibility to put ourselves first sometimes, and that we can become better mothers, better friends, better wives if we are stronger and more fulfilled.
It's such a beautiful message. Yeah, I could not agree more. Like having the own things that I've been through that really resonated with me, and then I have all sisters, so
Oh,
I saw like a piece of all of them in your books. So it's just I know it hit me, and I'm sure that every woman that has read your book feels the same. I actually started the women recently too. Speaking of, that book is incredible. It's a whole
thank
other
you.
story.
Yes.
But one thing I did want to bring up, since this is Natural Habitat Adventures and bears and nature are our love, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the lessons from the natural world that you hoped to weave into the novel that you wanted your readers to take from about Alaska or the wilderness or the wildlife?
I mean, that was probably the piece of this book that spoke to me the most keenly and stays with me the most strongly. This whole idea of, sort of going back to nature and living off the land and not leaving as big a footprint, not taking more than you need. Um, and, when I started writing it felt like, well, not very many people are doing this outside of Alaska. But now it really does feel like so many people are embracing this. And I think, when we look at all of the beautiful and wild places in the world, and I think if you can experience them and fall in love with them, even if you haven't been there, I think it creates an empathy. I say that a lot about books, but an empathy for the people who actually live there and for the animals that live there, and can create this idea among adults and children that nature needs to be preserved and, taken care of. And I think, once again, we are at a moment where things are potentially under attack, where nature and wild places are under attack. And it behooves us all to do whatever we can to connect with these places emotionally so that we can protect them and preserve them for future generations.
Oh, such a beautiful answer. Yes, it's right at our ethos too, of course.
Isn't it?
Such a beautiful answer. And I just, this from like a personal feeling, I know I'm wondering, and I'm sure a lot of people who have encountered Nat Hab's Bear Camp or have heard of it, what does it mean to you to know that this piece of land that your father loves so much is still going on? We're still bringing people here to experience this phenomenal location.
I mean, and not just that it still exists. To me, the fact that it still exists with the same beating heart and the same ideology and the same people. I mean, there was always going to be a place here because once that became possible, once my dad and Wayne made that possible, nobody was ever going to walk away from this particular spot. But to find it and to find a new generation of owners who who care about the same things and who are giving the same kind of sort of really natural and immersive experience and passing on the same message that was so important to our family about preservation, about um, you know, photography and all of these wonderful things that mean so much to us. That's what I'm really thrilled about. And I'm thrilled that, all these people come up to me all the time and, where do I go in Alaska? And it is such a gift to be able to say, oh, well, you can still go to Bear Camp, and it still is everything that my family would have wanted you to experience and more. So thank you for that.
And I would love to give a sense of place for everybody who has not been there yet. We've been talking a lot. We all visualized everything in your book, but I do have a little slideshow with some photos. So let's do a little show and tell. And I would love both of you to speak up about the pictures that we have here, but let's go ahead and get this up. All right. All righty. Awesome. Is that streaming okay for everybody?
It's good for me. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, as you can see, we have a big, beautiful bear just right at the beginning to set the place of where we're talking about in this incredible planet of ours. All right, let's go on. All right, Kristen, this is for you.
Okay, so here it is, the iconic. My mother made those curtains. Here we are. I'm, of course, the one in blue holding the book. the eldest, and I've got my brother and sister there, and two neighbor kids, and our dog, my dad in the back, mom in the front, and our sleeping bags. And, we were setting off from overly crowded and ultimately now, of course, as we know, empty Southern California, to head, north, for adventure. And I remember, listening to transistor radios and music and, making s'mores, everything that you would want on the ultimate family camping trip.
Once I saw this photo, all I could see was this, reading this book, and then all I could see was this photo. I was like, that's the VW bus. Oh my gosh.
See, what I
It,
see is we look like a traveling folk singer band. I mean,
I like the cowboy hat.
yeah, yeah, right
yeah,
here.
that's Laura.
Oh, cool. Okay, we're gonna go on to the next photo now. This one's for both of you.
All right, cool. So, of course, if you've been to bear camp, Kristen, I just wanted to let you know that we still do a small history tour of the camp.
Oh,
Talk a lot about how Bear Camp came into being, starting with Kathy and Lawrence meeting. Who Kathy was Lawrence's partner at the main lodge, and then how they also started another entity of Great Alaska Fish Camp, which was Great Alaska Safaris. And so Lawrence was introduced to Wayne, and this is them in front of camp there. And we just noticed in the past week or two, Deb, Lawrence's wife, said, "Look at the hat Lawrence is wearing.
Yeah.
It's one of the original Nat Hab Adventure hats that has the heart seal on it."
Yeah.
So that's pretty special. And we flew in and out there in the early days with Radisky Air. And Wayne and Lawrence had tremendous respect for one another. They've thought very much of one another, and that was so great for me to be right in the middle of both of them. Two great guys, so that was great.
it always seemed to me that that Dad really brought Wayne into the world. He had been out there alone, living in this little cabin, which is probably still part of your tour. All alone out there for however long he had been there. I believe they made the national park around him,
Yeah,
and his homestead, right?
right.
And so it was really, I loved, when we would go up and stay up there, seeing Wayne come over and talk to the guests and, sort of interact with the world. I thought that was kind of a lovely thing for the later years of his life. And I have to say, it kind of feels destined if my dad is wearing a Nat Hab hat. Like maybe this is where it was always supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, they did just a little bit of history. Um, from what I can gather, Bear Camp was established in the late 90s, but Wayne started out there in the late 60s. Um, he was out there for over 44 years in the Bay on this place, and they established the national park around his property in 1980. So he was there for a long time as the national park was established, and um, honestly, without Wayne, this particular piece of property would probably have been part of the national park. So I'm just grateful for all of that and having the ability to be for the guests to be on the private property, but we also have access to the national park and those other viewing sites and the beach and the tide pools and all the things. So it's a prime location for not just the scenery, but especially for bear viewing. So thankful for that.
And one last little thing. This person right here is Caprice. Yeah,
So
this is
Wayne
Caprice.
always had a dog. Wayne always had a dog out there as a companion, and this particular dog is Boots, and she felt like it was her job to keep the bears run out of camp or out of his yard. So it was always exciting to hear her start barking, and we would go watch her chase the bears out of camp. She was part of our protection.
That's such a great story. Okay, next for another big sense of place.
Okay, so in the right bottom, you'll see that most people that come to camp fly into Anchorage, or at least originate their trip in Anchorage, and then they make their way down to the bottom of the Kenai Peninsula to Homer, where you can spend a few days on the Homer Spit, and Homer, around Homer is just an amazing area. And then as we will fly you across to Chinitna Bay is actually where Bear Camp is. So we just wanted to put this slide in there to give you an idea of where you are in Alaska, because it's such a huge state. I mean, it's beautiful. It's huge. So we're just in the south central part of Alaska. So next on that list there. As you can see, I think, Kristen, you mentioned landing on the beach right there in front of camp. That's our runway.
You still do that.
We still do that. Yes, we do. And it is, we land at low tide on the beach, and we have a wonderful vendor who flies us out there. Nowadays, we fly out in de Havilland Beaver. So those beavers are the workhorse of the North. They're wonderful vehicles to be flying around, super safe. The big Tundra tires allow you to land just about anywhere, and that's what you need in Alaska, to be able to land just about anywhere, anytime. And this is basically what the camp looks like right now. So we try to keep it as cozy as possible. So let's see what we have here next. A lot of the terrain that you'll be walking on is similar to this. We walk out onto the mud flats or on the beach. We also walk out to our private viewing sites, which we're going to show you in just a few minutes, that overlook this critical wildlife habitat, a meadow that is closed to human activity walking out there, so the bears can just be bears and enjoy themselves. But this is a lot of the terrain that you're going to see. And this is such a beauty shot. We have snow out there most of the time on the high peaks of those mountains. Over to the left, just above the bear's back, is the homestead of Wayne. And like I said, at some point in time during the tour, we try to give that homestead tour, because it's a fascinating story. And there are so many of these stories in Alaska. I have a lady friend that lived across the bay from Wayne that homesteaded, had a place over there. I'm not sure if it was a homestead. And she lived there for years, most of the time with just herself and her daughters. And they carved out their world there, dealt with bears coming in or having to get food, and dealing with the wintertime. And they chose to be there, and they just loved, that was their favorite part of their lives. They loved this stuff. So just very strong and intelligent. I think some of the misnomers are that, oh, they go out into the vast earth or vast world out there because they don't like people or they can't get along in society. But that, a lot of times, that's not the case. They just really are very settled in themselves and are happy to be themselves, and just very intelligent people. So it's a beautiful, beautiful picture there. So this next site, I mentioned the next picture is our private viewing site on the property, and no one else except for our guests are allowed to be there. As you see, the bears walk right up to you to within a comfortable range. Our guides will make sure everyone is completely safe, but we really value our personal private viewing sites. And there's also our viewing platform that overlooks this exact meadow, that has a lower platform and a higher platform, so that you can see about 5 miles to the left of you and about a mile and a half in another direction. It's just beautiful. All right, so then next we have some really exciting news on this next. Oh, this is just giving you an idea of what is in front of. Sorry, what it what our relationship is with the bears. This is just a beautiful shot. We try to never move them off of their food. We try to never, you know, change their behavior in any way. We try to have every group have the same behavior so the bears can predict us and they can decide what to do. So that is the basis of bear viewing in Chinitna Bay. It's just let the bears do what they need to do. Okay. All right. So this is what I was saying is so exciting. I don't know if you all have received an email or have been looking on the website, but as soon as next spring, 2026, we are replacing the tent cabins that have been part of the bear camp for a while, and we are replacing them with these beautiful cabins, individual cabins that will be spaced out a little bit so that you won't be able to hear your neighbors snoring or anything like that, like you can in the tents. And we're also adding a wonderful, beautiful dining room. And the idea was to have lots of windows in the front of the dining room so that you can see the beautiful view and still feel like you're a part of the scenery. That was the plan. And as you can see, it's basically the same footprint as what we had before, and that's very important to us too. We made promises to Wayne back when we first started bear viewing there that we would leave as less of an impact as possible in the area, and I think everyone is doing a great job to continue that ethos as well. So, and then the cabins, a little close up of the cabins would be similar to this. So I'm really looking forward to these nice, cozy cabins. You still have plenty of windows, but you'll also have your own privacy. Now, each of these cabins will have their own flushing toilet inside the cabin. If you've ever been to bear camp before, you know you may or may not have flushing toilets before, but this is a big step in the right direction. I think this will help some of uh, our guests, some of the demographics that didn't feel comfortable using some of the. Kristin knows about the outhouses back in the day. Actually, you wrote about one of the outhouses in the Great Alone with I Never Promised You a Rose Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is a big step, and we're really looking forward to it. So we're putting some of them in the fall after the season closes down, and the rest should be put in the spring. So I'm super excited about it. So yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, looking forward to it.
I would love to hear a little bit, Caprice, just for myself, about your women's trips. I think
Yes,
so. Tell me a little bit about that.
that's a great question. So one of the things, you know, one of the things that I love about your books, Kristen, let me just make this really quick, is that so many, like some of the war stories or the Alaska story or so many of the stories, history was basically written by men. I mean, a lot of the history has been written by men. So, giving the point of view in the Winter Garden of being in Stalingrad at the time and being in France in the women's point of view. And, we know what the war was like, and I'm not trying to diminish that for the men, but sometimes the women's story just does not translate as well. And I think you did a tremendous job of that. I've got cold chills now thinking of all of the things that the women went through in the Winter Garden and the things that the women go through in the Great Alone. So I commend you for that, and I really appreciate all of the research that you did for that. Um, but a very exciting time in the world for women, and in what used to be a predominantly male society of bear guiding or guiding in general. Um, we do have trips now. They're called Women's Journeys. And there will be a female guide as well as only other females on the trip. And this, what it does to me is it helps women come together and form camaraderie that if not that they have anything against men or men against women, it just changes the dynamics when it's an all women's group. I think women need permission to have those groups and come together. So we do have trips all across natural habitats, different types of trips out there in the world, but we will be having multiple trips of women's only out to bear camp, Alaska Bear Camp. And we actually have one coming up in 3 days that is starting with a wonderful guide by the name of Jennifer Campman. And so it just has brought so many people together. I led one about 3 weeks ago. These are incredible women, very compassionate people, funny people that just were able to let their hair down, if you will, and just talk about what is interesting to them without any outside influence of feeling like they shouldn't. So I really, maybe we will have extra trips out to bear camp when the need arises and to different places that women reach out to want to go. So I thank you for bringing that up. It's an exciting time for all women, I think. So it's been good for me, and I appreciate the opportunity. So
Sounds wonderful. It really does. It really
yeah,
does.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to make sure you got that in Caprice. It's such a wonderful, mission that Nat Hab has put into place in the past few years, and I see some of the reviews or hear some people who have gone on them, and it feels like people are just completely transformed. And so the fact that
mhm,
you are a big part of those Caprice, like, thank you,
yeah.
and keeping our bear camp as amazing as it is, and keeping those promises to Wayne and Lawrence.
We have
So thanks.
people. Yeah, we do have people that we're forcing them to get on the plane to leave, we're making them leave. Well, not really, but men and women have tears in their eyes and just talk about thank us for such, trying to be good stewards. And that's, I don't have the vision or the energy, I guess, of the people like Drew Hamilton and different people, that have this wide scope of, or WWF, the big wide scope of being able to, be conservationist in different parts of the world all over. But if we can keep this little section and everyone do their part of their little section of the world, I think that is the best that we can do and depend on each other to take care of your world. So um, people leave with tears in their eyes, thinking it has changed their lives, and that's what it's about. So that makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah. And so crazy that we are already nearing the top of the hour. I told you we wouldn't get through half my questions. I knew this, which is like exactly what I hoped for. But Kristen, before I let you go, what do you hope readers take away from The Great Alone about Alaska, about resilience, and about finding home?
I mean, that's it. It's about, a love for the land, a love for nature, a realization that the world, even close to you, can be bigger and better and more dangerous than you can imagine. And I think, I'm always sort of encouraging one way or the other travel, because I think travel and experiencing different pieces, different lives, different places really does make you a fuller, deeper, richer human. And like we were saying earlier, and it shows you how important it is to be good stewards of the land for us and for our next generation. And then, of course, I hope they just like really love the book with a glass of wine. There's always that.
Absolutely.
Well,
And,
thank
and
you so much, you guys. This has been so fun.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Kristen. I enjoyed every single minute of your book. Like I said, I've already started the next one, and we would love to get you to Bear Camp sometime. So that's definitely, if we can make it happen, girl, we would love to have you. And Caprice, also, thank you. If you would have like any last words that you would like to share too.
Well, if you all are continuing the rest of the summer, if you're going to be at Bear Camp, I will meet you on the beach, and hopefully I will see you again in the future. Okay?
Awesome. Well, thanks both of you. And Rob, I would love to turn it to you to go ahead and close us off for the day.
All right, Brooke, thank you so much for hosting today as well. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel to Alaska and go to Bear Camp with Nat Hab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you could send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. So long, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.